Strap in for a jaw-dropping twist on a crisp morning flight with Sovereign Air. In the lap of luxury, an unassuming yet regal couple, Henry and Lorraine Carter, sat with an air of timeless elegance, unaware they were about to trigger a storm of controversy. Meanwhile, a seasoned flight attendant, known for her strict rulebook, was about to let a single, shocking mistake unravel her world. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below, and if you love the drama, like, share, and subscribe for more. On a brisk morning flight with Sovereign Air, an incident unfolded that would later ripple throughout the entire journey. In the elegant confines of first class, an unassuming yet dignified couple, Henry Carter and Lorraine Carter, sat quietly, their composure a testament to years of refined experience. They were dressed in understated, classic attire, their movements were slow but measured, exuding an air of calm confidence. The couple had long been regulars on Sovereign Air, known among insiders not just as discerning travelers but as the very owners of the airline. Yet, on this particular flight, fate had chosen to test the boundaries of respect and professional courtesy. As passengers settled into their plush seats and the low hum of the aircraft's engines filled the cabin, an incident of seemingly trivial nature was about to occur. A seasoned flight attendant, Ms. Victoria Reed, whose reputation for efficiency and strict adherence to protocol was well established, moved briskly through the aisle. Dressed in her crisply pressed uniform and with her name tag proudly displayed, she had built her career on the conviction that every passenger must be treated according to predetermined rules. However, her well-rehearsed demeanor was about to be undermined by a lapse in judgment. Henry and Lorraine, having taken their seats with the poise of individuals who had experienced countless flights, had simply requested one thing: a glass of water. For every other first-class traveler on board, this was a routine service, a gesture of hospitality extended without hesitation. But as Ms. Reed's eyes swept over the cabin, landing on the Carters, something inexplicable shifted in her expression. A spark of disapproval flickered briefly, and in that moment, her tone transformed from warm efficiency to icy detachment. "Water isn't available right now," she stated flatly, dismissing their request as if it were an inconvenience rather than a standard amenity. The words fell from her lips with a finality that bordered on rudeness, leaving Henry and Lorraine momentarily stunned. For them, the simple act of requesting a drink, an act that symbolized the basic respect owed to every paying customer, had been undermined by a callous remark. Unbeknownst to Ms. Reed, the couple's significance extended far beyond their seating arrangement. In a cruel twist of irony, Henry and Lorraine were not merely passengers, they were the founders and proud owners of Sovereign Air, individuals whose status in the company lent them an unspoken authority over every aspect of its service. In that brief exchange, the stage was set for an inevitable confrontation. The Carters' dignified silence was a stark contrast to the cold dismissal they had just endured. As they sat there, exchanging a glance that conveyed both disappointment and quiet resolve, a subtle tension began to build. For Ms. Reed, the refusal had been a routine exercise in rule enforcement, an adherence to policy without a second thought. She believed that by following standard procedures, she was ensuring uniformity in service, regardless of the passenger's background or status. Yet, in her haste, she had failed to recognize the inherent dignity of the individuals before her. Henry and Lorraine, with their calm assurance and refined presence, were not merely subjects of a customer service interaction, they were the pillars upon which the very foundation of Sovereign Air rested. Their experience, which should have been marked by courtesy and attentiveness, instead became the catalyst for what would later be seen as a monumental oversight. As the cabin settled into a rhythm of quiet conversation and the soft clink of cutlery in the fine dining service, the initial denial lingered like an unresolved note in a complex symphony. Ms. Reed's curt refusal echoed in the minds of nearby passengers, some of whom exchanged worried glances as they sensed that something was amiss. Even those who had been engrossed in their own travel routines couldn't help but notice the tension that had briefly flared near the Carter's seat. This moment, seemingly small and inconsequential at first, planted the seeds for a dramatic unfolding of accountability and redemption. The ripple effect of one simple misstep would soon extend far beyond the confines of a single request for water. In the quiet dignity of Henry and Lorraine's response and the unyielding authority of Ms. Reed's dismissal, the stage was set for a lesson in humility, respect, and the true meaning of service. The incident would soon force every member of the crew, and indeed every traveler on that flight, to reconsider the balance between rules and the human need for understanding. After the initial moment of cold dismissal, the cabin settled into a familiar rhythm. As the aircraft soared into the clear morning sky, the low hum of the engines mingled with the soft murmur of conversation and the clink of cutlery in the first-class cabin. Henry Carter and Lorraine Carter, the dignified couple who owned Sovereign Air, sat in their luxurious seats with quiet composure. Their movements, though measured and unhurried, spoke of a lifetime of experience in the skies. Henry's steady gaze and the gentle squeeze of Lorraine's hand were silent reassurances that nothing was amiss, at least on the surface. Yet, beneath the polished veneer of first-class service, an undercurrent of tension began to stir. In one corner of the cabin, passengers exchanged subtle glances as whispers passed between them. Most were unaware of the significance behind the couple's presence or the implications of the service lapse that had just occurred. For many, the request for a simple glass of water was a routine gesture, but for Henry and Lorraine, it represented something far deeper, a quiet demand for respect and acknowledgement, despite their unassuming appearance. Ms. Victoria Reed, the flight attendant renowned for her strict adherence to protocol, continued her rounds with practiced efficiency. Dressed in a crisply pressed uniform and sporting a name tag that bore the mark of countless flights, she moved briskly down the aisle, ostensibly undisturbed by the incident. Yet as she passed by the Carter's seats, a fleeting shadow of uncertainty crossed her features, one she quickly masked behind a veneer of professional indifference. She busied herself with attending to other passengers, offering customary greetings and refreshments where needed, but the initial rejection still hovered in the air like an unspoken question. Henry, ever the quiet observer, noted each subtle shift in Ms. Reed's demeanor. His eyes, calm yet penetrating, seemed to register not only the neglect of service but the underlying assumptions that had prompted it. Lorraine, flipping through the pages of a well-worn novel, appeared serene on the surface, yet every now and then her gaze would lift to meet Henry's, and together they communicated without words, a mixture of disappointment and the steady resolve that they would not let this small transgression define their flight. In the meantime, as the cabin continued to fill with the aroma of gourmet meals and the sound of gentle laughter, a growing sense of disquiet began to ripple through the atmosphere. Henry, with a slight, almost imperceptible movement, reached discreetly for his smartphone. Though set to airplane mode, he scrolled through a series of saved messages, his thumb hesitating momentarily over a contact labeled Operations HQ. His silence was not born of anger but rather of a measured determination to see this matter resolved quietly and effectively. He did not press send, not yet. Instead, he rested the phone carefully on his knee, his fingers drumming lightly along its edge as he watched Ms. Reed interact with other first-class passengers. Across the aisle, Ms. Reed's laughter at a joke from a nearby traveler briefly punctuated the subdued tension. She chatted with a well-dressed businessman, her tone light and her smile practiced, as if she believed that everything was as it should be. Yet, in that fleeting moment of levity, the disquiet of the Carters grew more pronounced. To them, each gesture of indifference was a reminder that their inherent worth was being questioned, not by the service they received but by the very assumptions held by those entrusted with upholding the airline's reputation. The quiet tension of that first part of the flight was a study in contrasts. On one side, there was the familiar comfort of first-class luxury, a realm where every request was normally met with attentive care. On the other, there was the subtle yet potent reminder that even in a world of high standards, a single act of disregard could unsettle the balance of respect and professionalism. The Carters' dignified silence and the barely concealed disappointment in Ms. Reed's eyes set the stage for what was to come. In that delicate interplay of duty and dignity, the seeds were sown for a confrontation that would force every person on board to confront the consequences of their actions. And though the flight continued its steady progress, the unspoken questions lingered, whispering that sometimes even the smallest oversight can trigger a chain reaction of accountability and change. As the flight pressed onward, the air in the cabin grew heavier with an unmistakable charge of expectation. The routine service had given way to an undercurrent of tension that could no longer be ignored. In the moments following the initial denial, Henry Carter's quiet resolve had transformed into a silent determination. Though he had not yet contacted Operations HQ, his eyes betrayed the storm of thoughts that now swirled beneath the surface. His discreet glances toward the service staff spoke of a growing awareness that something had gone deeply wrong. Ms. Victoria Reed, still maintaining her professional poise, soon found that the delicate balance she had taken for granted was rapidly slipping. Without warning, a terse call crackled through the cabin's intercom, a directive from ground control that resonated with unyielding authority. Ms. Reed, please proceed to verify that Mr. and Mrs. Carter receive every courtesy due to them as first-class passengers, the stern voice ordered. The instruction was clear and left no room for debate. Failure to comply would have dire consequences. Caught off guard, Ms. Reed's pulse quickened. The call seemed to echo in the stillness of the cabin, and for the first time that day, the resolute facade of the seasoned flight attendant began to show signs of cracking. She set aside the trays and hurried down the aisle, her steps now punctuated by a palpable urgency. Every movement felt as though it were under a microscope. Every glance from nearby passengers was a silent reminder of the gravity of the situation. When she reached the Carter's seat, her practiced smile faltered. With a measured tone, she addressed the couple, "Mr. Carter, Mrs. Carter, I'd like to check if you are comfortable. Is there anything I can offer you at this time?" The words, though polite, carried the weight of someone forced to confront a mistake. Henry looked up slowly, his expression unreadable, a blend of calm, disappointment, and a hint of stern resolve. Lorraine, ever graceful, offered a gentle nod but said nothing, her silence speaking volumes. For Ms. Reed, the moment was both a personal reckoning and a professional crisis. As she extended a tray with a single, carefully polished glass of water, she felt the full force of the room's scrutiny. Every eye in the cabin seemed to focus on her, each passenger aware that the situation had escalated beyond a mere service error. In that charged silence, even the background hum of the engine seemed to quiet, as if the aircraft itself was holding its breath. Henry accepted the water with a measured, deliberate gesture, his gaze locking onto Ms. Reed's with an intensity that left no room for excuses. In that brief exchange, the unspoken message was clear: respect and courtesy were not optional, they were the foundation of every interaction, regardless of protocol. Ms. Reed's heart pounded as she struggled to regain her composure. The stern directive from ground control had turned her routine into a trial, and the realization that the Carters were not just any passengers, but the very owners of sovereign air, was a bitter blow. As the cabin resumed its murmur of activity, the atmosphere remained irrevocably altered. Ms. Reed retreated briefly to the galley, where her hands trembled as she clutched a spare glass. The weight of responsibility bore down on her shoulders like never before. She recalled the directive from above and understood that the oversight had escalated into something far more serious, a challenge to her very authority and career. The incident was no longer a trivial lapse in service. It was a moment that could redefine her future with the airline. In the ensuing minutes, whispers rippled through the cabin. Some passengers exchanged knowing looks, while others whispered about the irony of a service provider being held to account by the very owners of the airline. For Henry and Lorraine, the simple act of requesting water had now become a profound statement on dignity and respect, a silent assertion that every individual, regardless of position or appearance, deserved to be treated with the highest standard of courtesy. And so, as the flight continued toward its destination, Ms. Reed found herself at a crossroads. The stern orders from ground control, the unwavering gaze of the Carters, and the watchful eyes of every first-class passenger had transformed a routine interaction into a pivotal moment. In that fragile space between duty and compassion, Ms. Reed would soon have to confront the consequences of her actions, a confrontation that would not only test her professional mettle but also redefine the very essence of respect in the realm of air travel. The tension that had been simmering in the cabin now exploded into a full-blown confrontation. In the wake of the stern directive from ground control, Ms. Victoria Reed found herself not only facing the quiet, unyielding gaze of Henry and Lorraine Carter but also the heavy scrutiny of the entire first-class cabin. The routine order to ensure proper service had quickly morphed into a test of character and professionalism. Marginal moments earlier, when Ms. Reed had reluctantly offered the Carters a single glass of water, a ripple of discontent spread through the cabin. Whispers emerged among passengers who had noticed her initial dismissiveness. Now, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation, as if everyone sensed that the repercussions of that simple act of negligence would soon be revealed. Just then, the intercom crackled to life with a new, even more imperious instruction. "Ms. Reed, please report immediately to the forward cabin," came a voice that carried both authority and finality. It was Captain Daniel Collins, a man known for his decades of experience and unwavering commitment to high standards at Sovereign Air. The message was clear: the incident with the Carters had reached the highest levels of the airline's hierarchy, and a formal explanation was now demanded. With her heart pounding and her pulse quickening, Ms. Reed reluctantly made her way toward the front of the cabin. Every step felt weighted with the gravity of what was to come. As she moved past rows of attentive passengers, she could feel their eyes burning into her back. In that moment, the familiar confidence that had once defined her presence was replaced by an unmistakable air of vulnerability. The very rules she had clung to so rigidly were now turning against her. At the forward section, waiting in a quiet, private area reserved for first-class matters, stood Captain Collins alongside a small panel of senior airline officials, including the respected operations director, Mr. Richard Hayes, and the newly appointed Director of Customer Experience, Ms. Evelyn Carter. Their expressions were somber, their silence heavy with disappointment. Henry and Lorraine Carter, seated nearby as silent arbiters, watched the proceedings with measured composure. Captain Collins was the first to speak. His tone was firm but not unkind as he addressed Ms. Reed directly. "Ms. Reed, we have received multiple reports regarding the service you provided to Mr. and Mrs. Carter. This isn't merely about a glass of water. It's about the fundamental values of respect and courtesy that Sovereign Air stands for." His words hung in the air, punctuating the seriousness of the matter. Ms. Reed attempted to explain, her voice trembling slightly as she recounted the events. "I was following standard service protocols, Captain. I believe that by enforcing the rules, I was maintaining order. I did not intend any disrespect." Her words trailed off as the weight of the situation became overwhelming. Mr. Hayes interjected calmly, "Maintaining order is critical, but it must never come at the expense of basic human dignity. The Carters, as you well know, are not ordinary passengers. They are the very pillars upon which this airline is built. Your actions have not only compromised their experience but have also called into question your judgment and your ability to adapt to the needs of our most valued clientele. At that moment, the room fell silent, and even Ms. Reed's inner resolve began to crumble. Her eyes briefly met those of Henry Carter, steady, unwavering, and filled with a quiet authority that did not require words. Lorraine's gaze, soft yet piercing, spoke volumes about the expectations that come with leadership and the respect it demands. It was clear that the couple, in their dignified manner, were not there merely to receive service. They were there to remind everyone that true leadership in service means honoring the individual, regardless of appearance or preconceptions. Ms. Evelyn Carter, with a measured yet compassionate tone, added, "This is not simply about a procedural lapse. It's a reminder that every interaction we have reflects on the entire brand. We must be vigilant not only in our adherence to rules but also in our commitment to empathy and understanding. Ms. Reed, your mistake has sparked a necessary conversation about balancing structure with human connection." As the discussion deepened, Captain Collins made his final decision. "Ms. Reed, I am ordering that you document a full incident report and attend a mandatory retraining session on customer service and diversity awareness. This is not meant solely as a punishment but as an opportunity for you to learn from this misstep. We believe in the potential for growth, but let it be clear, any further lapses in judgment will have serious consequences." His declaration resonated like a gavel striking a bench. In that charged moment, Ms. Reed realized the magnitude of her error. What had begun as a seemingly minor act of oversight had escalated into a situation that now threatened not only her career but the very integrity of the service standards at Sovereign Air. The confrontation was not a vindictive punishment, it was a profound call for accountability and self-reflection. As the meeting concluded, the Carters offered a final, measured nod, an acknowledgement that while the situation was grave, there was a chance for redemption. For the rest of the flight, the cabin carried a somber air of introspection. Passengers who had earlier whispered among themselves now looked on with a new understanding that in the realm of service, respect and empathy are as essential as any rule or procedure. Thus, the stage was set for a turning point, one that would not only challenge Ms. Reed's approach to her duties but would also reinforce to every member of the crew and every traveler that at Sovereign Air, the true measure of excellence lies in the harmonious balance of efficiency and humanity. After the aircraft touched down on the runway of Sovereign Air's hub, the tension that had gripped the first-class cabin during the flight slowly dissolved into a heavy, reflective silence. Ms. Victoria Reed, her heart still pounding from the confrontation, felt the weight of the day's events settling deep within her. As passengers began disembarking, the atmosphere was laden with unspoken judgments and a palpable anticipation for what was to come. In the terminal's quiet corridor, Ms. Reed was escorted to a reserved meeting room by Captain Daniel Collins and a senior representative from the airline's board. There, sitting at a long polished table, was Mr. Donovan Blake, the revered founder and driving force behind Sovereign Air, along with several other high-ranking executives. Henry Carter and Lorraine Carter, whose dignified presence had defined the flight from the start, were also present. Their calm, unwavering eyes had observed every moment of the ordeal, and now they silently awaited an explanation. Mr. Blake began the meeting in a measured tone. "Ms. Reed, your actions on board have raised serious concerns about the values we hold at Sovereign Air. A simple request for a glass of water should never have been mishandled, especially not when it came from passengers who are, in many ways, the very heart and soul of this airline." His words were firm and direct, leaving little room for ambiguity. Ms. Reed's voice trembled as she attempted to explain, "I followed standard service protocols, sir. I believed that enforcing the rules was maintaining order, and I never intended to disrespect Mr. and Mrs. Carter. Her voice trailed off as she saw the stern, disappointed looks on the faces before her. The board's silence spoke volumes. The incident was far more than a procedural lapse, it was a breach of the fundamental respect every passenger deserved. Henry Carter, speaking with quiet authority, added, "Respect isn't just about following procedures, it's about recognizing the dignity in every individual. Today's oversight has compromised that dignity, not just for us but for the reputation of this airline." Lorraine Carter's eyes, soft yet resolute, mirrored her husband's sentiment. Their disappointment was palpable, a mixture of hurt and a desire for accountability. Captain Collins then outlined the necessary steps. "Ms. Reed, effective immediately, you are required to submit a comprehensive incident report detailing the events of the flight. Additionally, you will attend a mandatory retraining session on customer service and diversity awareness. This is not merely punitive, it is an opportunity for reflection and growth. Our commitment at Sovereign Air is to balance operational excellence with genuine empathy and understanding." In the midst of this charged environment, Ms. Reed's colleague, Ms. Tara Jennings, a fellow crew member who had observed the events with a heavy heart, spoke quietly from the back of the room, "We all strive for perfection, Victoria, but today, your actions have forced us to confront the human side of our service. It is our duty to learn from these moments rather than hide from them." Her words struck a deep chord within Ms. Reed. As the meeting progressed, it became increasingly clear that the board was not solely interested in reprimanding her. They wanted her to understand that the essence of the airline service was built on respect and genuine care for every passenger. Mr. Blake's gaze was steady and unyielding as he delivered his final verdict. "While the gravity of your error is undeniable, we believe in redemption through accountability. However, understand that any further lapses in judgment will force us to take more severe actions. You have until the end of the day to decide whether you can commit fully to our values here at Sovereign Air." With that, the meeting adjourned, leaving Ms. Reed alone with her thoughts. The corridors of the terminal echoed with the murmurs of departing passengers and the soft rustle of suitcases, but inside, she felt an overwhelming stillness, a moment of profound introspection. Standing by a large window, watching planes taxi and take off, she grappled with the realization that her rigid adherence to policy had cost her dearly. Every moment of the flight replayed in her mind, the cold tone, the dismissive words, and the piercing stares of those who had placed their trust in her. Determined not to let this be the end of her journey, Ms. Reed took a deep, steadying breath and resolved to embrace the opportunity for growth that lay before her. The retraining session was not just a formality, it was a lifeline, a chance to reconcile the gap between duty and decency. In that quiet moment, she acknowledged that true professionalism required both adherence to procedures and an unyielding commitment to human empathy. As she walked away from the meeting room, Ms. Reed felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew that rebuilding trust would take time, and that her future at Sovereign Air now depended on her ability to learn and adapt. The memory of the Carters' dignified silence, their unspoken demand for respect, would forever guide her actions. And in that solemn promise to herself, Ms. Reed vowed to transform this moment of reckoning into a new beginning, one where every interaction was defined not just by efficiency, but by heartfelt respect for every individual she encountered. If this story resonates with you, please like, subscribe, and ring the bell to support our channel as we continue to explore stories of accountability, redemption, and the power of human connection. Life often teaches us that respect, empathy, and accountability are the true cornerstones of human connection. The story of Ms. Victoria Reed and the Carters illustrates how even a seemingly minor act, a refusal to serve a simple glass of water, can reveal deep-seated assumptions and the fragile balance between rules and compassion. The Carters, with their quiet dignity and unwavering resolve, remind us that every individual deserves to be treated with courtesy and care, regardless of their status or appearance. Meanwhile, Ms. Reed's experience shows that rigid adherence to protocols, when devoid of genuine empathy, can lead to unintended consequences that challenge our sense of integrity and professionalism. It is a poignant lesson in humility. We must continuously reflect on our actions, recognize our mistakes, and be willing to change. In our everyday lives, whether at work or in our personal relationships, we are called to look beyond mere procedures and see the person behind every request. True leadership and service are defined not by how strictly we follow the rules, but by our ability to listen, understand, and respond to the human need for respect. Let this story serve as a powerful reminder that every interaction is an opportunity for growth, where accountability and redemption pave the way for a more compassionate world. If this message resonates with you, please like, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell to support our journey as we explore stories that inspire us to embrace empathy, accountability, and the transformative power of human connection.